helpful, but for example, Lagos State had a manual return
Valentine.
which was done online this year. But the problem is a day, 2 days before the last day, the portal crashed.
Yeah, the last more rush.
Exactly.
Okay, but that speaks to us as well as individuals. As
Last minute syndrome, yeah. You see.
And then I think another critical part of the conversation
okay,
is
so we're coming
what
back
government
now.
focus should be really.
I like how you just grabbed it.
I wanted to give it to you, not for me.
Thank you.
Am I good?
Yeah, good. So if you want to push it to yourself, just pull it.
Do I need
Feel
to
free
do
to
that?
pull it. It's flexible. Yeah.
I'm sure people will hear me. My voice is usually loud.
So speaking to this.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so we're good to go. Mic's up. Studio is live. Good morning, Lagos. Thank you very much for being a part of the show this morning and joining the conversation for Lagos Talks 981. As we ended Locker Room 981, Valentine had teased what we're going to be talking about for the next 1 hour. It's a special, so we're not going the normal route whereby we take a national news headline for the day and have you comment on it. This morning, we're going to be picking a particular topic, which is also really important and is also trending in the news. And we have experts to share their thoughts with us on this particular topic. I'm Ayo Mairese.
I'm Valentine Ohu.
Now, don't forget that you can send in your messages and comments throughout the show. So please send to WhatsApp on 0809 444 0981.
And on Twitter at Smooth981FM. The hashtag is LagosTalks981. We're streaming live on YouTube, which happens on specials. We have a special guest in the studio, so you can watch live and listen to their comments.
All right, the topic before us this morning is understanding the Nigerian tax system. And to discuss this with us, we have two lawyers and tax experts. Oyeyemi Aderibigbe is with us. Good morning, Oyeyemi Aderibigbe.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Val.
Good morning.
Good morning, Lagos.
Thank you so much for coming. And we have Oyeyemi Oke.
Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Val.
Good morning.
Good morning, Lagos.
For the purpose of this show, we'll call the male Oyeyemi, and the female Oyeyemi.
Oyeyemi Oke, then Oyeyemi.
All right.
It's so close, but I mean, what are the odds? Tax lawyers, Oyeyemis, or lawyers, tax experts, Oyeyemis. Great to have you on the show,
Thank you
Oyeyemi
very
Squared. So, I mean, the aim of this show this morning is to break down the issue of tax. And more than ever, it's becoming important because we've seen the work that the federal government has done with FIRS. They're serious about tax as a revenue generating platform or agency, as well as for the state government, LIRS, the Lagos Inland Revenue Service, and they're not smiling. So what they've also mentioned is that ignorance will no longer or has never been an excuse for getting into trouble. I remember once with an organization I worked with, we had to file and they slammed us a fine or said, oh, we had under remitted, and we didn't even have a clue. But honestly, they couldn't be bothered whether you had a clue or not. The moment they find out that you were either not paying what was your tax or you're paying less, you'll backdate it and you'll have to pay. So it's important for us to talk about this. In the headlines recently, we heard about the tax bill that is being considered. It's passed the second reading in Senate, and it's very likely going to be passed. We want to talk about the details of that.
That's finance bill.
The finance bill and the details. It details tax as well. So we need to talk about that. But the first thing I'd even want us to start with is, first of all, for individuals, and then we'll go on to businesses, particularly speaking to small and medium scale enterprises to see how they can better manage their tax filing. So as individuals, we pay or we get tax for our pay as you earn. For those who are in paid employment, could you please expand what's your pay as you earn? How should it be remitted? And what are the responsibilities of us as individuals in that?
And kindly start by maybe defining what a tax is.
Okay. All right. I think before we even start the conversation around the requirements or the obligations that arise, I think there is a big issue with understanding why we even pay tax. Socially, Nigerians, for some reason, feel like it's government that has the benefit. They can see the benefit, and so there's a lot of tax avoidance or evasion. Now, as to obligations on the personal side, and that's a policy issue, there needs to be convergence on that point. Government, individuals, companies need to see the need and the benefits that the taxation system, an efficient taxation system, would give us as a nation. Moving on to the requirements for an individual, and I'll let Oyemi speak to the nitty gritty
So
on the
before you move
dailies.
on to the requirements, just a bit. So what are the why should I pay tax, or what's important?
I think that the question even goes to the bottom line of why we're organized as society.
Okay.
Right? Each one of us as individuals find ourselves on the earth, right? But then we choose to organize as communities, and across the world you have different systems adopted. In some systems they don't even pay tax at all because they want to incentivize money, investment, etc. In some systems the tax rate is high, but you don't find the citizens complaining because they can see the benefits and the evidence of what the taxes or the tax payments are deployed for.
Okay.
So I personally believe that taxation is necessary, but two things: it must be efficient, it must be fair, it must be progressive, and there must be underlying convergence in terms of all the stakeholders. If government is imposing or seeking to introduce a new tax, the polity, that everybody should understand why, should understand the benefits, should understand the gain,
Yes.
both long term, short term, both as it pertains to their own income, because for every policy decision there is impact on the individual, there's impact on the system.
Absolutely.
So it's a conversation, it's not lord and servant, which it appears to be.
Yes.
In our society a lot of people don't feel like stakeholders in the taxation system, and I think that is one thing that government has to deal with, because asking me to bring my money, and I'm using the language that you would usually hear, it's my money. I should understand why you need it. I should understand what it's to be deployed for. And then you also doing the asking, you should be able to justify. And I think that is if we meet that thing, the mindsets will converge, and there'll be little drama around the pay your tax. Government doesn't even need to be as aggressive as they appear to be becoming. It won't be the cane and
The stick.
the stick, it won't be the stick approach,
approach.
because everyone will feel like a stakeholder in the process. So I think that if we're talking policy, before we even start looking at law, the requirements, and what currently obtains, I think that everybody, regulators, individuals, companies across all the business sectors, need to be more involved and come to an alignment in terms of their mindsets. And I think that would help with some of the current problems that we have with taxation.
Thank you, Yemi, because I mean that excuse me, that's the other definition of tax as a noun, because the way we've been perceiving it, like a strain, a heavy demand on us. But we know that a tax is a compulsory contribution we make to state revenue that's levied by government on workers and people who do business. But can you explain to us, or rather just detail different forms of taxes that exist?
Okay. Before I go into that, I think I asked a question as to why tax, or why do we pay taxes.
Yep.
I think the major reason would be to cater for government expenses. Simplicity. But the question you ask as a taxpayer is, and I always say the gospel of preaching tax compliance is difficult, especially in this climate.
Yeah.
Because you find out that if you say if I tell someone you're supposed to pay taxes to cater for government expenses, and I got this question, what kind of expense? The gentleman asked me, you're saying I should pay taxes. I fuel my generator, the road to my house, I made it. I have a borehole in my house. So the question is, what does government do for me? And just to touch on the point Yemi made with regards to stakeholder engagement, to let both the tax subjects and also government know that when you need, I mean, the reason you pay taxes is to cater for X, Y, Z, and also there should be responsibility on the part of government to ensure that the monies are deployed for the right purpose. Now, to talk about taxes,
Yeah.
going now into the technical aspects. Now, on the side of, I mean, from a personal income tax perspective, I would, I think, let me try to also answer IO at the same, I mean, Val at the same time. In terms of the type of taxes you pay, usually they are categorized into two broad I mean, two broad themes. You have income taxes and transactional taxes. Income taxes will now include taxes such as personal income tax, company income tax. For petroleum companies, you have petroleum profit tax. On the transactional side, you have taxes such as stamp duties, such as VAT, which is, I think, is literally the most popular type of tax, which most people know, because at some point you would have paid because you make payments. I mean, you purchase a good or a service from time to time. You also have taxes such as capital gains tax, which is also a transactional tax. You have withholding tax, which is a transactional tax, but in the real sense of it is income tax. So those two broad categories. Now, if we pick each one of them, let's look at personal income tax, which I made reference to. Personal income tax is is a form of tax which all individuals are supposed to pay immediately you start earning some kind of income. Now, the question would be, in what bucket will these individuals fall into? You have individuals that are working that get salaries. You have individuals that run their businesses, maybe using their names or using a business name. And when you go, I mean, those individuals also are subject to personal income tax. Immediately you incorporate a company, the nature of taxes would change, which would be company income tax. But on the personal income tax side, so if we look at a worker, for example, who is whose taxes are deducted at source by the employers. The worker is supposed, I mean, the employers are supposed to deduct taxes and remit to the relevant state and land revenue service. For example, if it's Lagos State, it goes to the Lagos State and Land Revenue Service. That is supposed to be done on a monthly basis. Employers are supposed to remit the taxes for the previous month, no later than the 10th day of the next month, or 10th day of the next month. And if you are an individual that has, for example, an SME, and all you do is perhaps, let me make a good example, you make clothes and you sell clothes and all that, there's an obligation on you also to remit taxes. Everyone is supposed to file your tax returns no later than the 31st of March of each year.
So that's the annual tax return.
Yeah.
Annual tax
We'll
returns.
talk about that in more detail after the break. But what we've been able to establish now, thanks to our guest, is just a general overview of what taxation is, what tax is, and then why we should pay tax, the need, and just like Osai mentioned on WhatsApp, saying that, well said, OEME, there needs to be a convergence between polity and government on the deployment of taxes remitted. So just to highlight that point, we have a few more things to talk about. We said touching on the kinds of taxes that we have, the types of taxes that we have, and we'll go into more detail on the different types of taxes very shortly. This is Lagos Talks 901 here on Smooth 98.1, and we're speaking about understanding the Nigerian tax system. Stay tuned. Nice one, thank you.
Thank you.
Let me tell you something about
It's very eye-opening.
I'd like us to break down, when we get to the part where we will discuss filing tax returns, from an individual perspective, from a business perspective.
Yeah, that was the next thing I was going to ask.
Oh, yeah.
And then, when you start a business, how many staff or what is the earning power before you are mandated? So, for instance, all these people that open small businesses, maybe I have a tailor. I thought you were going to talk to that, but now you said the tailor shop. So I have artisans who sew for me. Should I start filing tax? Am I to pay income tax on that one? So, just to add to that, I think that is going to answer that question.
To the extent if they are employed, but you know the way. So if you look at the way those artisans, right, usually it's always on a contract basis. I give you this work,
Okay.
you come do for
So
me.
it's independent contractor like, so
Exactly.
individually.
So ordinarily, you're supposed to deduct withholding tax.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, withholding tax. Yeah. So like people that do contracts for you. So for instance, MC services. I go and I'm a contractor for you,
Yeah.
but they will expect that you're paying your own tax, or
Mm.
they get
Exactly.
withholding tax on
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
All right, mic is up. Studio is live.
Glad to know you're still there. You're tuned in and listening to Smooth 98.1. Smooth Breakfast with Valentine Ohu.
And Ayomai say.
It's time. We are well into Lagos Talks 91's final segment for Smooth Breakfast, and this morning it's a special. So Lagos Talks special. This today is focusing on understanding the Nigerian tax system. A lot of questions have exposed how the amount of ignorance that exists among us. You know, when it refers to the issue of tax, and because the government has become so aggressive, and this time to collect taxes from not just businesses but individuals, and with all the punitive measures that are lurking in the corners, just waiting to clamp down on people, you violate all this, well, things that, well, I'd say not restrictions per se, but the I'll say commandments or instructions that are handed down from ministries, governments, and agencies, especially at this time, looking to 2020, which is barely 4 weeks away. We have Oyemi Square, Oyemi Aderigbe, and Oyemi Oke, both lawyers, and Oyemi Oke is a tax expert and lawyer. Speaking about this tax issue, before the break, we talked about understanding what a tax is, why we should pay tax, the different types that exist. But let's look at filing tax returns, annual tax returns.
Yes.
That was in the news yesterday,
Yes.
and we got at least 3 people asking us specific questions regarding if they should or if they're eligible to file their tax returns, based on the fact that one guy sent a message and said, "Oh, well, I started up my business 4 or 5 years ago. I haven't done business at all with that business name or company name. Should I file my tax return?" So explain to us, because you mentioned here, it came as a shock to me, not as a shock per se, but just surprising to be reminded that as an individual, I'm supposed to file
Yes.
annual tax returns
Yes.
before March of every year.
Yes.
Why?
That's what the law says. But to talk about filing of tax returns, I'm going to look at it from 4 strands. Now, the first would be filing tax returns as an individual that is under employment. The second would be filing tax returns as someone who owns his or her business. The third would be a company filing tax returns for the taxes paid on the salaries of the employee. Then the fourth will be filing tax returns by that company itself to the FRS. So let's start with the first one. Now, filing tax returns for individuals, the Personal Income Tax Act mandates that all individuals must file tax returns to the relevant tax authority, whether as an employee or as a business owner.
Okay.
Now, as an employee, if let's assume, and I'm going to be a bit theoretical, let's assume you do not earn any other income any other income apart from the income from your employment. What you need to do is to file the income or declare the income which you earn from your employment and file. In Lagos State, for example, the relevant form is Form A. You fill the form. It has details about the type of income you've earned, both earned and unearned income. Earned income is income which you earn maybe from your business or your employment. Unearned income will be investment income from maybe rent and all that. So let's assume that you do not earn any other income except income from your employment. You just file that with the relevant tax authorities. You do not need to make any extra payment because the payment has been made on your behalf by your employee, but there is the obligation for you to file that return. That is one. The second one would be, let's assume that, and I think I will just stick with my example of someone who has maybe a tailoring outfit, and he or she is required also as a business owner to file tax returns. Let's assume also that this person does not have a company, so he or she is also running the business on its own as a small business. That person is supposed to file the tax returns by end of the tax year, which is, no later than 31st of March of every year. So ordinarily, that person would fill the relevant income he or she has earned, and file the necessary documents. If there's a tax to pay, he or she needs to pay. Usually, the taxes are the income is subjected to what we call the certain reliefs, such as the consolidated relief allowance, and also the income is subject to what we also call the graduated tax table. I would not go technical now, but essentially, once that is done, or that needs to be done rather, and you have complied as a small business owner. Now, the third category, or the third strand which I mentioned, is a company that has employees. You are also supposed to file annual returns on the taxes which you have deducted and remitted to the uh, uh, relevant state authority as regards taxes. Then the last one will be a company itself. So, for example, some people would say, for one reason or the other, whether for the purpose of the ability to raise more funds or the purpose of wanting to separate the business from you, they incorporate a company. And if you incorporate a company, there's also an obligation to file tax returns. If you are supposed to file, if you're a company, you're supposed to file tax returns to the FRS, which is the Federal Inland Revenue Service, and not the state. It is the individuals that file tax returns to the state. So for the obligation with regards to filing tax returns for companies, at the end of your financial year, no later than 6 months after the end of your financial year, you're supposed to file tax returns to with the Federal Inland Revenue Service. Now, what will be contained in that return? You will also have a self-assessment form which you fill, but in addition to that, you're supposed to file your annual financial statement, which we call the AFS. We're also supposed to file what we call the capital allowance computation, and also your tax computation. So essentially, what that is that you self-assess yourself to say, I have made X amount, right? I am entitled to these following reliefs based on my capital allowances, and as a result of applying that capital allowance, I have X amount to pay. You might have instances whereby you do not have an amount to pay, but you need to file that. Once that is done, you have complied. Now, the FRS may have more questions as to, okay, can you provide us certain information based on the information which you have filed? For example, they may ask questions which we call a desk review. They may ask questions on certain items in your financials just to ensure that you've made the right declaration. Usually with this, if you've done this, then you should be entitled to get your tax clearance certificate, barring any other compliance issues with the FRS. So that's it in a nutshell.
All right,
All
that's
this-
a huge nut.
Very huge one. Thank you, Ayo. Because I was trying to stomach it all. And to be honest, while you were talking and calling all those acronyms, my head was just counting numbers. How much is this one? How much is that one? So the filing, it's first of all, can an individual file for himself?
Yes,
Yeah.
you can.
It's possible. You don't necessarily need a lawyer.
Let me add this question from Tola on WhatsApp to what Bounce asked. That can the individual tax returns be filed using the new e-tax system?
Yes, it can. I think the FRS has, the
LIRS,
LRS, for example, I know they just started that.
Yeah.
I think when we would know if it's fully operational will be maybe by March next year.
Okay.
The LRS has done something good for this year. As of March this year, filing of tax returns, annual returns by employers was done electronically. So I guess gradually we are seeing a situation whereby everything will be electronic. Government has, LRS has introduced the e-tax system, but to be honest, as of today, I personally haven't tested it, but I'm almost certain that by March next year, you would have to use it.
Now, in other countries, it's just as an aside, you have situations whereby when you pay, at the end of the year, once they evaluate how much you've paid over the year as an individual, they may give you a tax refund because you were paid. I've never heard of a tax refund in Nigeria. Is that
Actually happens.
Does that
Tax
happen?
refunds
It happens.
okay?
So I've seen a situation whereby from the FRS, a refund has been. FRS has actually given a refund. Typically, what is done is that the revenue authorities would rather go the credit route. So what does that mean? For example, if you've overpaid, let's assume that your liability is 10 million, you've overpaid. by 5 million, that means you paid 15 million. They will say, okay, we recognize this 5 million, and you use
Which
it
is
to
not a bad
offset.
thing.
Yeah, you use it to offset. But I think I must quickly point out, it's not as easy as I'm saying it, because typically what would happen is that when you make a claim, most likely they would want to do an audit just to be
Yeah.
sure that there is no skeleton buried somewhere.
Yeah.
But if they've satisfied themselves, they usually would have no other option but to recognize that you have a credit, or if you insist that you actually want your money back. Some will say, you know what, for cash flow reasons, I want my money back to be able to use it for my business. If you insist, they would actually give you.
Fantastic. All right, I'd love to us to take some comments and questions from
Okay.
WhatsApp. Cruz is giving us an honest experience where he says, I won't lie to you, I'm one of those people who would avoid paying taxes if I had a choice because of how things have been in our country. Nevertheless, payee was beyond my control. I've also had to update company taxes payment this year. Believe me, it wasn't funny because he had piled up, especially the VAT penalties. I'm glad to say I'm now tax compliant, but because of my proposed business interest, not because I see the encouragement to do so by the government. Well, keeping our fingers crossed, we'd remain hopeful that things would change positively. And I mean, that's an honest evaluation of what his his experience with taxes, and I'm sure he speaks to a number of Nigerians.
Oh, yeah.
You're doing it because, like you mentioned, it's aggressive, but it doesn't have to be aggressive. If people see the benefits, they would be more willing. Still complain perhaps, but more willing, to pay taxes.
Uzo sent in a question on WhatsApp. He said, I just registered a company, and one of the prerequisites for opening a corporate account is the TIN number. How do I go about getting this?
Okay.
Yeah.
So now getting your TIN number can
That's
even
tax identification
tax
number.
identification number can even be done at the point of registration. The CAC, which is a Corporate Affairs Commission, and the FIRS have come together to have a unified system for doing that. So at the point of registration, because in the course of your registration, you would also have to pay certain stamp duties, which is under the jurisdiction of the FIRS. So during that process, you can get your tax identification number. But the tax identification number is not the whole story. You still need to get your tax clearance certificate, which would indicate that you probably haven't started business. You also need to get your VAT registration done, and all of that you get them done at the FIRS office as well. Subsequent
Should it be that
registration.
hard?
To add to what Oyemi has said, the FRS, I think the Joint Tax Board actually has a website whereby you can actually feed in the name of your company, or I think the registration number, one of the two, and you can get your TIN generated almost immediately.
Oh, that's brilliant.
There is always sometimes the website sometimes is inefficient.
It's
So-
FIRS.gov.
But it has something on JTB.
So the joint tax board.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes.
Now let's, with regards to newly registered companies, you can have that, get your TIN immediately. But for old companies that have been in operation, maybe dormant, but now you want to start, operating using that business name or registered business, how can you still generate this on the website?
So there are two options for that. The first one is what I have said with regards to going to the website to get the TIN. That is, and like I said, sometimes the website is inefficient. So if you are really, really desperate to get it, you may not get it at that time. If you have, if the website is down. The other option would be to go to the local tax station, maybe the station that is very close to the business or the company, and you go and make an application. The FRS will ask for certain documents, which are the incorporation documents. You fill a form, and within 24 hours to 48 hours, you get your TIN.
All right.
Yeah, but I think it's important to point out that sometimes, if, for instance, you used that company to do business at some point and then it was dormant, you run a business account, you may have to present financials to tell your history, particularly if it's a long time. So if you've not done business at all, you would typically, and now because they're the FIRS is also trying to ensure congruence between what actually is and what their records show. So they would ask you to either bring a statement of affairs, which shows that this is just these are the details of my company, the shareholding, all of that. We haven't made
Direct-
money,
list
we
of
haven't done
directors and all.
business,
Yes.
all of that. Or you would have to present financials
Okay.
if you've actually maybe at some point done business.
Mm.
Right.
Sometimes there may be penalties.
Mm.
Yeah, I was gonna say they'll
Yeah.
backdate it. But now, is there some form of tax relief for small businesses that haven't earned up to a certain amount? So I'm starting out, or
Mhm.
is it from the moment you make your first naira that you pay tax on it?
Okay, so there is. I'm going to answer this question also from two perspectives. I'll answer the question from a revenue perspective and a profit perspective.
Yeah.
Now, from a revenue perspective, right, you are supposed to charge VAT, right, on every sale that you make. So on all your invoices, you're supposed to charge VAT and not keep the VAT, but remit the VAT to the FRS.
Mhm.
Now, that is the responding from a revenue perspective. But that VAT, one thing you should note is that VAT is not tax paid by you, but paid by the beneficiary of your service or your good. Now, on from an income tax perspective, you only pay taxes on profit, not on income. So if
Okay.
you have not made any profit, then you cannot pay tax, or taxes will not apply. At least income tax will not
All
apply.
right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure some people would want clarity on that, but we need to go on a break. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation. We have a few comments and questions in particular coming in from WhatsApp, so we'll probably just dedicate a large portion of the
Okay.
rest of the show to responding to people's questions. This is Lagos Talks 91 here on Smooth 98.1.
I have a
Go.
question.
Okay,
I
what
have
is the
on
I
question?
have
withholding
tons
tax.
of questions.
Okay,
Tons.
what-
I have a question on withholding tax. So, is there a difference between VAT? You know, usually if I issue invoices to
Mm,
clients,
mm,
I put VAT on those, right?
Yeah.
they
And
withhold.
then there are certain clients
That
that
will
I
I-
put withholding tax from.
thank you very
Mhm.
much.
I don't understand that.
They deduct it from
I
source.
even feel like
Then
they
the,
don't
the
relate.
amount remains the same.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a what's it called? It's
But
a net of
how do you calculate
literally.
that? Because when I asked a question, then they said they pay the tax
So what you need to
on
do, right? What you need to do is to ask them to provide you the receipt of payment because it's your tax.
Yeah.
You should be able to use that receipt of payment to know, net off your tax liability at the end of the year. Then that VAT that was paid to you, because the VAT was actually paid to you, you're supposed to remit that amount to the FRS.
So what I mean is, what if your business, obviously,
Mm.
say assume that it's a year old
Yeah.
or 2 years old,
Yes.
and for the past 2 years you've been supplying one client,
Mm. It makes a
and they've been
difference.
collecting this tax
Yes.
as withholding tax.
Yes, you're supposed to get all the receipts,
Yeah.
and also the VAT you've been charging, you're supposed to remit.
No, VAT I'm charging is
Yes.
the withholding tax I'm talking about.
No,
It's
that's where
different.
people. That's the mistake
It's
people
different.
make.
That's what I'm saying. So
Yes.
that's what I'm saying. That
It's
the VAT
different.
is on the invoice.
It's on the invoice.
They say they collect it
We're coming back
and they pay
in
you
6 seconds. We
the
have
amount
questions.
without that VAT.
Without VAT.
All right,
So
we're
it
back.
depends.
Mic
Is there
is
an
up.
oil and
Mic
gas
is up.
company?
Mic is. All right, Lagos. We're back. This is Lagos Talks 91, and we're speaking on understanding tax system in Nigeria. Very, very interesting conversation. A number of comments. Valentine is raising his hand like in the classroom.
Yes, anti-eye.
Anti-eye. All right.
Please, I have a question.
Now, for those who are just tuning in, sorry, Val.
Mm.
For those who are just tuning in, like I mentioned, we're talking about understanding the Nigerian tax system. And speaking to us, we have guests Oyeyemi Adebigbe and Oyeyemi Oke. And we've just been speaking around laying the foundation of taxation, what taxes are, different types of tax, and some details about filing. And so Val is going to go ahead with this question now.
Yes, it's about withholding tax.
Yes.
Assume you have a business that has been in existence for a year or more, and since the existence of that business, since inception, all the transactions you've been making, the sales you've been making, you apply VAT, value added tax, on each sale,
Yes.
and this is usually 5% of the total,
Yes.
right? And you have one client dedicated, to provide that you've been providing services to, and this client now tells you, for every invoice you send, you put your VAT.
Yes.
I am going to remove this VAT when I'm paying you, and I'll pay you X amount minus VAT.
Yes.
And you ask why, and they tell you because we remove this VAT and we pay it from our own end.
Yes.
So it could be assumed to be withholding tax. Is it? Is there a
No,
difference?
no. I would so now let's practicalize it. The value of your service is 100 naira.
Yes.
You're supposed to charge VAT at 5%,
Yes.
which is that means when you are issuing the invoice, everything should come to 105.
Yes.
Now, if the service, let's assume that you're an individual that
Mhm.
has provided this service. If you pay to, I mean, if you issue the invoice to Yemi Oke Limited, for
Mhm.
example,
Mhm.
I have an obligation, right, to deduct withholding tax at 5%, right? The withholding tax I'm supposed to deduct is 5% of your 100 naira, right? Now, by the time I pay you, I'm going to pay you 100 naira less 5%, which is 95 naira. But I'm supposed to also now pay you the 5 naira VAT. That means ultimately you get 100 naira.
So
But
okay.
the 100 naira doesn't belong to you, or the total amount doesn't belong to you. 5 naira out of the 100 naira is VAT, which you ordinarily should remit to the FIRS. So your ultimate income should be 95 naira. But do not forget that the 5 naira, which has been deducted as withholding tax, okay, limited, right? It is your tax. So you can use that amount to offset your tax liability at the end of the tax year. What you need to do is that you need to come or ask Yemi Oke Limited to say that please provide me the evidence of your remittance of withholding tax, because that is what you would use to claim your credit from the relevant tax authority. Now, there's only one instance whereby VAT is deducted, and that applies only to oil and gas companies. So if you provide service to oil and gas company, they will deduct withholding tax and they will deduct VAT. Why is this so? The FRS has written to, or through a circular, has directed that all oil and gas companies should deduct VAT, essentially because they know that most of them are very compliant and it's easier to collect VAT from them.
All
From
right.
source.
Yes.
Thank you very
So
much.
there's a clear difference between VAT
Yes.
and withholding
Withholding
tax.
tax.
Withholding
Yes. So,
tax.
just to help listeners understand more, so withholding tax is income tax. VAT is transactional tax. Using what the two lines that Yemi had drawn earlier. And withholding tax is an advance on your income. So when you are accounting for your own income tax, you should put in mind that at some point I've paid withholding tax through different people. I need to pull all of that together and include it in my tax reporting,
Yes.
so that I'm not, because a lot of small businesses make that mistake. What they do is they report based on their own records, and they omit that fact that at some point through their different customers, they have actually paid an advance on their income tax. With those receipts, you add it to your report, and it can it would be credit to your account.
Sorry, in just a few seconds. I'm sorry. So after collecting this withholding tax now, say the vendor, okay, limited, now gives you the withholding tax payment. Do you now, are you supposed to pay the VAT again on top of that withholding tax if you have the evidence of payments to FIRS?
So, as we have said, withholding tax, I think you're still struggling
It's
as
two lines.
to how, the nature of withholding tax and VAT. Withholding tax is different from VAT,
Okay.
right? You are government agent for the purpose of VAT.
Yeah.
So once the monies are paid to you, you're supposed to remit. Now, when you remit the VAT, you keep the receipt for you for potential tax audit in future.
Yes.
With regards to withholding tax, what you need to do is to chase me if I am the consumer of your service, to chase me so that I can pay you with the receipt. The receipt is what you can use to claim that amount as a credit against your ultimate income tax.
Tax obligation.
Now,
yeah.
from an operational perspective, in order to be able to claim that credit, when you get that receipt, you're supposed to take that receipt to the LRS, for example, and convert that receipt to what we call a credit note, which you would keep. So at the end of the year, so let's assume that at the end of the year, you have a total withholding tax credit note of 1,000 naira, right? And your total tax liability is 9,000 naira.
Mm.
So what would happen is that out of that 9,000 naira, you've already advanced. I mean, you
1,000.
made an advance payment for 1,000 naira. So what you actually be out of pocket in terms of your cash flow will be 8,000 naira.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you so much. We need to go on a break. When we come back, we need to go on a break to digest that information. Now, we have a number of comments. We try to work through as many as possible before we have to end the show this morning. But this is Lagos Talks 91, and we are talking about understanding the Nigerian tax system.
So, did it work?
I don't understand.
Okay, so see,
please
Let
explain.
me-
You know
let me
when-
break it down. Let me be very
Try.
Yes.
My client
Yeah.
is me.
Yeah.
It's happening to.
Yeah.
We're very aware of Valentine's.
Yeah.
Of course, I don't think everybody understands that.
It's a hotel that
Yeah.
they supply the products to.
Yeah.
They've been collecting this tax since over a year.
That's withholding tax.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whatever name they want to call it, share my tax.
Mm.
Right? Now they're asking me to present my tax clearance certificate
Mm.
if they are to continue business with me.
Mhm.
I filed for this tax clearance and I've filed my taxes and everything. The last stage is to clear this other statement within this period that they've been collecting withholding tax.
Mhm.
I let my lawyer know that this is the situation. Now I have to go back to that my client to ask for the evidence, like you said,
Exactly.
Yeah.
of the payment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that will that now cover all my obligations?
It depends on what your tax
Earnings
position
happen,
is.
yeah.
So,
Yes.
like I said, if for example you have withholding tax of value of 250,000 naira and your total tax liability is 300,000 naira, that means you will have to still pay 50,000 naira extra. Conversely,
Who calculates this liability?
is a question of self-assessment. For example, your accountant or your tax practitioner will look prepare the annual financial
Financials.
statement, now do the tax computation,
Okay.
right? So it's you
Yeah.
essentially. Then you
Yeah.
fill your self-assessment form, file with FIRS.
Yeah.
Then that will be the basis of
That's
any
the
yeah.
calculation.
Yeah. So if they find it to be incomplete or not enough, then they will come back to you.
And if
and
it's
then-
more, then they'll do it for the whole.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh boy, tax this, tax that.
Yes, so now let me now break it down because I don't understand. Valentine understands because it's a peculiar situation.
To him.
Yes. So who withholding tax? Where is it remitted to?
So
The authority.
Which
no,
authority?
so
FI
it
or
depends
LI?
on it depends.
FIRS.
No,
It
if it's
depends.
personal income, it's
Yes.
What's called LIRS.
So
if it's
it-
company's income,
So wait, so
is
so
FIRS.
the difference is that if I MC a job for a company and they take withholding tax, it goes to LIRS.
Exactly.
Yes.
Then if like Valentine's company in this case, it goes to FIRS.
FIRS.
Then who
Yes.
does what's it called? VAT go to?
It's VAT is collected at the state level as well.
We need
No,
to,
no, no. VAT goes to
At
FIRS.
FIRS, sorry.
We need to-
PIT
see
is
this
just
question
state
you just
level.
asked?
It's state level.
We need to put it
VAT,
out
but we
there.
can't because I want to
See,
answer people's
I
questions.
to answer your question.
Yeah.
So, if you understand what on dealings, income tax is on earnings.
No, I
profits,
understand the difference, right?
Now, so withholding tax is somebody paying your income tax in advance,
Okay.
or you have paid it through that person.
Mm.
VAT is something that is due to the government for things people do,
Alright, so on,
and then
on
you
it-
are the agent of the government. So VAT is not your money.
yes, okay, that's what I wanted to just clarify.
Yes,
so
VAT
that
is never
you're
your
supposed
money.
to pay both VAT and withholding
Withholding
tax.
tax,
Okay, great. So
yes.
one doesn't cancel the other.
No.
Yeah, that's what I
People
wanted
just
to-
net
That
it
is
off.
the answer to my
Yeah, that's the
question.
answer. So I wanted to break it down. I was like, so now I've understood.
But guess
that.
what?
Oh.
A lot of people have chopped
Yes,
their
I didn't know
VAT.
they didn't their VAT. I didn't
Yeah.
know. They used to just
And then
VAT.
the ones I've
for my
seen,
empty jobs
the,
just for extra money. Like I just money
they
for
gross
extra.
up, right?
What's
A
that?
lot of people gross up.
Yes.
They
But
gross
that's
up
for
VAT.
withholding tax.
No,
Just gross up. I just
You
told
know,
them
VAT
VAT. I
as
heard
in
that
they
they're giving 20%.
VAT.
I am
You
my
put
own
it on
problem.
your money, on your earnings. That's
Yeah.
I'm supposed to get.
Okay, guys, I'll come back in 6 seconds.
I
6
don't
seconds.
need
6
to
studio,
need
studio,
VAT.
studio, studio, studio.
Sorry, that's what you say.
Yes, it's Smooth 98.1 here on Lagos Talks 91 special, and it's been such an enriching conversation understanding the Nigerian tax system. We've had experts definitely shown their worth. Oyemi Oke and Oyemi Adewigbe.
Cruz calls them teachers.
Honestly, in the
He said,
sample.
thank you both for the morning class, this morning's classes. Please mention the name of your teacher room, so we know where to look for you, my answer, for further questions.
Alright.
We're gonna
We'll
tell you when
mention
they
that,
start
yeah,
from this
before the end of the show. So please make sure
let's attend to as many questions as we
as
can.
possible.
Dixon
Dixon.
says, "Good morning, Val, Ayo, and our guests. Please, I willingly opted to start paying tax after payment and all for a tax clearance card and TIN. That's tax identification number. I ended up with a card with an error in my name. They advised me to abandon it and get a new TIN and card. I kept asking." What happened to that one? How does he rectify this?
Okay, I would assume that that is the LRS. It's a tedious process, but it can be done. I
Okay.
don't think it's advisable to the extent that the TIN doesn't carry any other person's name. I don't think it's advisable for him to just abandon and just go and get
A new.
any number. So
Alright.
what I would advise is you should go to the LRS and make the relevant complaint. And like I said, it may take a bit of time, but
It's
will be
worth
done.
it.
Okay, we have
Right.
3 minutes. So
Yes, Uche says, so sharp. My dad is retired and his tax accountant requires him to send his business statement every month. Why?
If he's still earning, he has to pay tax. If you're still earning income in any way, he has to pay tax.
Alright.
That's
Sly
what it
says,
means.
Sly says, a friend of mine that receives 25,000 naira salary wants to apply for a visa. And one of the requirements is tax clearance. How can you provide that since he doesn't pay tax, considering the low salary? That's what Sly says.
Well, he needs to pay tax. It's as simple as that.
Hi guys, I work with a startup and also run my own business. We have 4 employees at a startup where I work, including the founder. I understand from the office accountant that because we're less than 5 staff, we don't pay the PIT or pay as you earn for staff or company tax. However, as a business owner, I charge VAT on the products I sell and remit these, even though I only have 2 staff working with my business. I'll be honest, I don't exactly understand why different rules apply for both scenarios.
No, I think the accountant may be mistaken. If you employ as much as or as little as one person, you should pay taxes on the salaries. Perhaps maybe what is being confused may be pension.
Yes.
So
Yes.
pension is
Pension requirements,
is-
they're both
yes.
5 staff.
Yeah.
5 staff here. Thank
No,
you.
no, I
It's three.
actually think
It's-
is it?
Yeah.
So it's 3 now.
Oh,
All right.
3 now,
Thank
okay.
you.
315.
Kachi?
Kachi says for a registered company that has not done business since corporation, you'd have to pay a penalty of 20,000 naira and present your bank statement along with affidavit saying you've not commenced business since registration. So going back to that question I asked about if you wanted to revive, a particular business name. Thank you, Kachi, for that clarification.
Thank you, He, for your message. That every Nigerian cannot calculate his taxes, neither can he afford an accountant, but every citizen of a developed country can. Can an Excel sheet but just be produced so we can just compute this and see what it is?
Yeah.
A final question though. If
Okay.
I am a government to myself in terms of providing the basic services that the government, the tax that I pay to the government should provide for instance, lights, generator, I fuel my generator, I pump my own water from the borehole that I paid money to sink, and all these other services, do I have a right to sue? Thank God you guys are lawyers. Can I sue the government to pay? Pay me in damages all the money I've lost in paying for all these things.
I would let
before.
Oyemi answer that. But I think one quick point I want to make with regards to ability to employ a tax manager in terms of capacity and income. What can be done in order to help you calculate your tax simply is you can download an app called T-Book. T-Book is essentially a tax repository, including laws, includes how you can actually make computation of your money. So go to either the Google Play Store or the iOS, you will see T-Book there.
All right. That's very useful. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
And then to answer the question, it's an obligation that you have. If you want to create a cause or a class action on that point, you may want to. But if it's a legal obligation, you have liability. You're exposed as a business, as an individual, if you do not remit the taxes. And just to take us back to what we were saying at the beginning on new laws that are coming up, the finance bill that we're talking about is not altogether because a lot of times small businesses feel like they're paying unfair rates and they're taking out a chunk of their money to pay tax that they can't even explain.
Yes.
Right? And government is seeking, although there are questions around the way the law has come to be or the process of bringing it on, government is seeking to draw lines, make small businesses pay smaller rates, and even put a bracket where certain companies who don't earn up to 25 million don't even have to pay company's income tax. So,
That's
Amazing.
brilliant.
so
Thank
if
you.
we're looking at it
It's not
from that,
altogether
it's not
bad, eh?
altogether bad.
Not bad.
Thank you,
Thank you
AME
so
squared.
much. Oyemi Okay and Oyemi Adewibe. How
Thanks
can
for having
people
us.
contact you privately quickly?
Okay, so I work at Templars. Templars is a law firm. It's a full service law firm. You go to our website www.templars-law.com and you can reach out to me. My email is there or any of the lawyers there.
All right.
And we
Thank
work
you.
24 hours.
Oh,
Nice.
fantastic.
You can reach me on. I work with TaxAid. I'm a partner at TaxAid Professional Services, which is a tax management company. You can reach me on o.oke, okay spelled Oscar Kilo Echo at taxaid.com.ng.
Fantastic.
Tax.
Thank you so much. All right, Lagos, that's all we can take this morning. Tomorrow is our birthday, so make sure that you are here tomorrow morning. We'll have fantastic giveaway for today.
All right.
Good morning. Next up is Kaide with Strictly Soul.
Yes, and of course, happy birthday to our guest analyst on the Grapevine, Chef Jeff.
Yeah,
3000,
happy
and that's his
birthday.
handle. So wish him happy birthday.
Happy
from us.
birthday, Chef Jeff. Oh,
Hey,
okay.
guys, God bless you.
I hope you were well.
Oh, yes, you did. There's so much, like, towards the end of the show,